Welcome to my 199th video on my work with OO gauge. This part will deal with a number of odds and ends that I brought back from British model trains when I went up to Cambridge this past weekend. Buildings, back scenes, buffers, a van, some signals, a loading gauge, a controller, and a couple of wagons. There will be some running video later on. I went up to see Nigel with British model trains in Cambridge mainly because I needed more Dublo buffer stops for the parking tracks coming off the Dublo turntable that I recently installed. And I also wanted Nigel's help with the traction tyre issues I was having with the Airfix Fowler 4F tender engine that I was trying to service and convert to three-rail operation. But whilst I was up there, I also picked up quite a variety of other odds and ends, which seemed relevant to other ideas I was having, or just generally relevant to my modelling prototype of pre-World War II LMS operations. So I came back with this box of miscellaneous goods. And here it all is unpacked, and where it is unpacked is quite relevant since I got many of these items with the intention of using them to make this recently created shelf extension of my Dublo 3-rail tabletop a bit more interesting. The shelf was added so that I could make use of the Dublo turntable that I picked up at the Ancaster train show. This begins to get a bit like the old lady who swallowed a fly. I built the shelf because I wanted to install the turntable connected to my tabletop, but now I wanted to pretty up the shelf a bit and fill up some of its space with interesting things. As mentioned, I specifically wanted some more Dublo buffer stops as I needed to put buffers on the ends of the parking tracks coming off the turntable, so that engines wouldn't run right off the ends of those tracks. I also wanted to try to put some kind of back scene behind the shelf. I had a back scene behind the table, but that ended at the end of the table. And though it would be hard to connect another back scene well, I definitely thought that having some kind of back scene would be better than just seeing the wall. Nigel recently got the range of large Gauge Master back scenes in stock. I'm not sure that I'd unequivocally call them large, as though they are very long, 3 sections making up 9 feet in length. They're not really very high at only 12 inches. For my other OO gauge layouts, I've used the ID back scenes, which are 20 inches or more in height, which I find more satisfactory. Still, these Gauge Master back scenes offer quite a bit more than the Pico back scenes, which are really tiny even in their nominally large size. I bought the Gauge Master Open Field and Cloudy Sky back scenes, as these seemed to best lend themselves to what I wanted. The others in the Gauge Master range tended to include buildings that I didn't find very suitable. I bought these 2 LMS bulk grain hoppers just because Nigel happened to have them and they appeared to fit my prototype. I was actually a bit concerned as I wasn't sure if these wagons were really appropriate for pre-war running. As it turned out, although they might seem to have something of a modern appearance, these wagons are entirely appropriate for operations in the 1930s, as according to Essery and Morgan's invaluable book on LMS wagons, these grain hoppers were built by the LMS according to diagram D1698 from 1928 on. The book even includes a photograph of a wagon from 1932 looking exactly like these models. These wagons were built to transport mainly imported grain, which was becoming more significant in the UK in that period. Nigel gave me the 3 signals seen here. They need a bit of repair, but they will help to make it look somewhat as if there are some signals in the area of the shelf extension. As I've mentioned in the past, although I do like to signal accurately, and have made significant attempts in that direction on my other OO gauge layouts, for the Dublo tabletop I've just been putting in a few token signals without really attempting comprehensive and correct signalling. The other item seen here was the last thing I picked up, as I spotted it just as I was leaving. I really like these old Dublo loading gauges. It seems to me they're the best you can get, with their arms properly suspended on chains, and since they're made of metal, hanging nice and level. I already had one of these on my tabletop, but I definitely thought that I could use another. Now, I have to admit that buying this building probably didn't exactly make a lot of sense, but Nigel had picked up several Hornby-Scaledale buildings in a collection that he bought, and this one just appealed to me, especially since buying it as a used item from Nigel made it way cheaper than importing something similar from the UK. Nigel actually had a similar larger station building that was fitted with lights and a smoke generator for the chimney. I left that one for someone else, but I did bring this one home with me. Another thing that I brought back was these 4 metal Dublo platform extensions. I mentioned to Nigel that these were hard to get, and he said that he thought he had some somewhere, but they weren't in very good shape. He dug them out, and I brought them home. Unfortunately, someone has removed the back wall from the only one that originally had a wall, the top one as seen here. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to be able to do with these. I'd like to make the platforms of the station on my tabletop a bit longer, but there isn't room to add the full length of these extension pieces, so I'd have to cut them to do something. And I need the platform on the main station side to have a back wall, so I'd have to do something about that. The station extension, if it happens, will be a separate project for a future video, so these platform extensions won't be seen again in this video. Nigel also had a couple of Dublo signal cabins that he just picked up, and I thought it would be good to have another one in the shelf area. They were both a bit odd. This one has been modified with some additional painting. The other one just had the original paint, but in rather poor condition. I decided to go with this modified one for the shelf. This van was just a regular Oxford die-cast item that Nigel had just got into stock. It rather appealed to me, so I added it to my list. It reminds me a bit of my own childhood when my mother bought her tea from a man who came round in a painted van, although that was orange Pico Tips, I think, rather than Lipton's. The van itself is an Austin 7, so appropriate for my pre-war period. I noticed a couple of these Gagemaster Model W controllers on the floor at Nigel's, and I asked if I could buy one. This is really just laying up against possible future projects, but I thought that I might as well whilst I had the chance, as again it's much more economical for me to buy locally than to import from the UK, and something like this wouldn't normally be available locally. The Model W is basically like the Combi, but without a power supply. There's just a single multi-strand wire going to a DIN plug, which accommodates 16-volt AC input and controlled 12-volt DC output for the track. I wanted to put buffer stops on the ends of the turntable parking tracks. For some reason, some of these new buffer stops that I got had holes in them that were bigger, so the screws that I'd been using for fixing down Dublo track, etc., just went right through the holes, so I had to find some larger screws to fix these buffer stops in place. They do need to be screwed down, as that's the only thing that keeps them in place. Here are the parking tracks now all fitted with buffer stops, some held in place by my original smaller screws and some with the larger brass screws that I just fished out. This signal needed its top arm repainting as it just came as bare metal, so I got it onto the bench and started with some flat black for the inner portion of the semaphore arm. I wanted to try to mount pieces of the Gagemaster backscenes behind the shelf extension. I started by taking the backscenes out of their tubes, unrolling them, and then rolling them up again the opposite way round and putting them back into the tubes for a while, in order to try to take out their tendency to roll up and get them to lie flat. I also cut a piece of 1x2 wood to the correct length and got out double-sided and invisible tape. The sections of the backscenes were each 3 feet in length. The length that I'd determined for behind the shelf was only a few inches more than that, so I didn't think it worth attaching another piece. I just went with using a single section. Here's one of the sky sections, which just have sky and clouds with no horizon. And here are the 3 sections of the open field scene. The 3 sections could be joined to make a continuous 9-foot backscene. But in this case I just wanted to use one section, though the others may come in useful in the future. The problem was that these open field sections had a very high horizon, whereas the effective horizon at the end of my existing table backscene was only a couple of inches from the bottom. I thought that it was going to look really wrong if there wasn't some kind of matching between the horizons. So my idea was to sort of cut a slope into the end of one of these sections and then have sky behind it. I chose this section to use. You can see what I mean about it being just short of the total length. I took the section down and just tried it against the shelf to see how it might look. It's a little bit less high than the backscene I've got on the main table. I mounted a section of sky on the wood using double-sided tape, and then cut a slope into the end of the field section. I guess this was a bit crude, and I could have made a better job of it. Then I mounted the field section over the sky section, again using double-sided tape, 3M carpet tape specifically. I taped the field section down to the sky section using a bit of invisible tape. Of course, the tape isn't entirely invisible, but I think it'll be less noticeable than the shadows would be if the sections weren't taped together. I drilled holes and screwed hooks for hanging into the top of the wood. I mounted brackets through which to pass the hanging cords, one on the end of the window frame seen here, and one on the wall at the other end of where the backscene would go. I screwed a clamp to the wall to hold the end of the hanging cord, and a clamp to the window frame for the cord at the other end. I'd run out of the white clamps, so I used a bulldog clip here. Then the backscene was suspended by cords, looped onto the hooks at either end, then passed through the brackets and held by the clamps. Initially I mounted the scene higher than it needed to be. Then I adjusted it down so the bottom went just behind the shelf. I'm not too happy with my attempt to slope the horizon, but it probably does look slightly better than just having a massive square jump. You can also see here how I've put the Scaledale station building and the signal cabin at the end of the shelf. I parked the Lipton's tea van beside the station building. The station building proved a bit of a problem. I thought what was intended to be the platform side of it looked really nice, but there was a large non-transparent canopy sticking out from that side, so you couldn't actually see any of the detail on that side unless your eye was right down at the level of the board. So I ended up putting the canopy at the back against the wall and having the back of the building on display as seen here, since it looked much more interesting this way round. Here you can see the main length of the backscene, and also the grain hoppers on the turntable. Not that that was a really sensible place for them, but I just put them there for the time being. I returned to painting the signal. Now that the black had dried, I used some red for the main arm and for the lens, and then some green for the other lens. Actually, shouldn't the lens on the distant arm be yellow and not red? I put that signal onto the table, just where the inner line went past the engine shed. I put the loading gauge at the end of the turntable line. The Scaledale building doesn't exactly fit in with the Dublo theme of the table, but I do think I'm going to keep it there. I had this pack of Porter figures which I'd picked up at a train show. I put them in place around the Scaledale building. I'm not exactly sure what it's supposed to be, but it doesn't look entirely unreasonable to me. You can see more clearly what I was saying about putting the platform canopy at the back here. So that was that so far for these various odds and ends. There is still a fair amount of empty space on the shelf, and looking at it now I think that I may add some other items, perhaps a water tower for example. Now I'll try a bit of running video showing these items. Okay, I'm going to try and see if I can do a bit of running. Specifically, I'm going to see if I can pick up these bulk grain wagons, these LMS bulk grain wagons, and run them, but it's all going to be a bit iffy, because the engine that I've got on still is the 4F that I converted, and we know he's a bit prone to derail, so it's a bit optimistic trying to do a running session with him, but we'll see. Famous last words. And we don't seem to have got past go there because he's decided he didn't want to pick up. Oh dear. Oops. Okay, well there's problem one. Clearly this crescent signal is not going to work. I thought it would, but it wouldn't. It won't. It's not high enough. You can't blame the 4F for that. That crescent signal is not high enough. Oh dear. So, you know, you always have these problems. That crescent signal was not high enough above the tracks for the 4F to be able to get past it. Ooh, this is a converter wagon. Now, this is also probably derailed now because very optimistic. Oops, mind yourself. I think that's actually on. It's just not a very easy rolling wagon. That's not. You don't know. Because these are tension lock wagons. They're not actually Dublo wagons. They're these grain wagons. Oh, so we do have that there. Where are we? Oh, dearie me. Yes, I was rather afraid he wasn't going to get over that point too satisfactorily. Now, I had this coupled. It came... So this is the problem of not having enough hands. I had that coupled to him, but it came off in the debacle with the... crescent signal there. Okay, is this going to work? Probably not, but we can try. Okay, well, we got it off there. The problem is I'd have to back this train up to get a... I want to get a I wanted to get a oops, I seem to have got stuck there. Oh dear, I don't know why. Don't know why we got stuck there. I'm trying to back round very gently here, as porcupines make lava. And of course I've done it too gently and we got stuck on the point because this thing won't go over. The problem is this won't go over points if you do it too gently because it... Ooh. Okay, and I do have a brake van with another converter wagon sitting here. Whoops-a-daisy. Isn't it joined? More or less. Oh dearie me. This was actually supposed to be showing clear, I think. But anyway, though probably shouldn't be since we're going the other way now anyway, but anyway. I don't know how much of this is even coming across. So we've now got the train hooked up, and we'll try and go forwards, I guess, and see if it works. Did I change the point there? No. Yes. Yes, I did. Oh, but I've stopped him on... I changed the point, but I've stopped him on this point where he won't go. Now, I was checking whether I changed that back point because I wasn't sure that I had. Well, there we go. Oh! Ooh. Well, those grain wagons, that's not even the 4F's fault. Those grain wagons have decided they want to derail. I don't know. Just because they can, just because they're high, I don't know. I don't know. Well, I may not have had them railed right in the first place, I don't really know. Oh, blimey. Oh, I think I'm going to have to give up. Famous last words. Oh, for goodness sake. The problem is every time this 4F gets to a point going slow, he tends to stop. And these grain wagons are not very stable themselves. And they're not, of course, not meant for Hornby Dublo. I don't know what they're meant for. I don't know who made them. Well, see, he cannot get over the points, this 4F, unless you give him a bit more power. And you give much power, and these grain wagons, because they're so heavy and top heavy, they tend to come off on the corners. Oh yes, see, they've come off again. Well, clearly these grain wagons are not suited for running on this track. Oh well, what can you do? That's okay. The grain wagons, I guess, can just go back and be used. We'll try them on the main Hornby layout, where they're perhaps more suited. But otherwise, that's the rest of the odds and ends there. We got some porters around the little building there. And we've got the rather approximate, we got the buffer stops on the parking tracks now. We got the rather approximate backscene, and I don't know what we're going to do with that crescent signal. Possibly just give up on it, because it doesn't seem to be high enough to actually let an engine go underneath it, unfortunately. So I just wanted to see if these LMS bulk grain hoppers work any better on the modern Hornby track than they did on the Hornby Dublo. The Hornby Dublo, not so good. They had a tendency to derail going round the curves, I found, as we saw. What have we got here? That's actually a Bachmann 1P tank, ex-Midland 1P tank I've got in front of them, so I suppose you could say it's a passenger tank, but it's a little black 044 tank. It'll do for pulling this train of just a couple of little grain wagons, and I've got a big old ex-Midland LMS brake van behind. The train in front is, that's one that's been sitting on this Hornby layout for a while. That's the Bachmann Midland 1F. well, a little backman tank, but we're not going to be running that now. We're going to be trying to run this train with the 1P and the 2 grain wagons. So let's just pull it away at a nice sedate sort of freight speed. Well, I don't see them wobbling. Of course, this is, I mean, in fact, these are third radius curves he's going around, whereas they were first radius curves on the Dublo layout, and they were first radius curves and noticeably less smooth. Here he's going around smooth third radius. He's going over points. He's going over several points there, but then going over the points is not usually so much of a problem with a modern track. Not as much as it is with the old 3-rail track, which can be very bumpy going over the points. So I think we can probably say that yes, the problem was just, these grain hoppers are not, they're modern wagons, they're not suitable for running on the Dublo 3-rail track. They're large, wow, they've only got 4 wheels and they're rather top heavy, so, if they do get rocked a bit, you can see how they're going to be prone to derail. But of course, they were real wagons that ran quite extensively on the LMS. I was a bit surprised how early they were designed. They were designed right back in 1928, so I find this a bit hard to stop because there's unlike the other one, you don't just run it to the bottom to stop it. You have to stop it in the middle to make the train stop, because if you take it further over, it starts going backwards. And it doesn't even have a détente in the middle. I think the latest ones do. The latest Morley hand controls, I believe, do have détentes in the middle, but mine don't. Anyway, so there you go. 2 LMS, rather nice 2 LMS bulk grain hopper wagons, and they do run fine on the modern track.
So, as you saw in my first running attempt, the 4F ran into the crescent signal and derailed. I thought that I would try to remount the crescent signal, perhaps a little higher and a little further back, so it wouldn't get hit by trains. I had some leftover pieces of the foam tiling that I'd used for the surface of the main table, and I thought that I could make a base for the signal from that. I marked around the metal base of the signal on the tiling. So I'd marked out a piece to serve as a base for the signal. I cut that piece out with my craft knife. I wanted a screw that would hold that piece down firmly to the tabletop, so something about twice the thickness of the tile in length. I drilled a hole in my base piece with a pin vise. And then I screwed that piece down to the table where I wanted to place the signal, basically where I had it before, but just a little further back from the track. Then I used one of my regular fixing screws to screw the signal itself to the base. And there it is. Not exactly a thing of beauty, I guess. Actually, I've never really liked these crescent signals, and I've avoided buying them, but I was given this one, and it is appropriate to the Dublo age of modelling. Here's a view of the signal and its area from a more natural angle. With its new base, the signal shouldn't create any problems with hitting trains, as seen here with the 4F going under it. I backed the 4F onto the turntable and parked it in one of the parking tracks. So there we are. I'm not sure how much running the 4F will get in future, as it really can't handle running over some of the points in some directions, but it can be run with a train if its route is chosen carefully, so it may get some more outings. Meanwhile, there will likely be a couple more buildings coming to this shelf, and I do have 2 or 3 other loco projects in the works that should be coming soon.